money. Money, neighbor, money. Money, neighbor, money. Money, you can keep your conniving money. When you build not corrupt, in a build there be money. Now because your money done, you come with conniving money. When you had your pocket full, in a build there be money. Now because your money done, you hustle for tell me money. Yes, money, neighbor. Money, neighbor, money. Money, neighbor, money. Money, now know what you conniving money. Neighbor, neighbor, joker. Neighbor, neighbor, joker. Neighbor, neighbor, joker. That's all the money that me work for. A 2 pound note and I give that piece. A 2 pound note and I give that piece. A 2 pound note and I give that piece. This is all the money that me work for. I said money, neighbor. Money, neighbor, money. Money, neighbor, money. Money, now I don't want you conniving money. Oh, Joseph.
It is now 8 hours 15, and the leader of the PNCR is in the house with us, or in Norton. I don't know if we are on 2 different time zones or what happened, but he is here. Mr. Norton, good morning, welcome to the program.
Good morning, and thanks for having me.
All right, so you had us in a bit of suspense there. We were expecting you at 7:15, 7:30.
Well, the truth of the matter is I was waiting on a call, and then when I call the contact, he said that they sent a link, so I've now checked the link.
All right, sir. As they say, water under the bridge. I trust you had a wonderful Christmas season. I saw you were out and about walking around and greeting people and so on. Nevertheless, compliments of the season to you and yours.
Same to you and your listening and viewing audience. I hope they had a very Merry Christmas and looking forward to a prosperous New Year.
Thank you. I'm sure they've been looking forward to hearing from you. And so let us talk about what you have to tell them. I'll give you the first go. If you have a statement you would want to make, you want to talk with them, and then I'll point out questions.
I am preparing a New Year's message, and most of what I want to say will be in the New Year's message. But in the interim, what I want to say to people is that in this period, we have to be very vigilant. We have to be mobilized and stay mobilized. We're at a point where we have to confront a government that seems hell-bent on excluding us from benefiting from the resources of Guyana. And that is not something we can take lightly. So we have to be able to respond to that. The other thing is that it is clear from all the actions that the government is taking that their intention is domination and control. And they're using a number of approaches to ensure domination and control. I heard you referring to handouts. It is clear that they do not intend to put the resources into making people independent. What they're doing is giving handouts, so-called bonuses, things that can't change your life. It can only suffice for a couple of days. But the real genuine things that need to be done to transform the society. For instance, I think it makes more sense if you develop a program to put people into business and give them the resources like we were doing when we were in government to put people into business, then that will have a long-term impact and it makes you self-sustainable. What they are doing are things that will make you dependent. And once you become dependent, you're controlled. And so clearly that is one of the strategies they are using, and we have got to push for strategies that will result in genuine development of our people. I think that is one area of focus we need to pay careful attention to.
Good. And so let me, in congratulating you on that marvelous victory to become leader of the PNCR, let me ask you, well, you're now the leader. What would you consider to be your priority areas going forward?
Priority areas have got to be, first of all, be in touch with the people to rebuild the party units and community groups from the bottom up. The second most important thing to me is to put a proper public relations and communications unit in place. It is my view that for too long we have allowed Jack Doe and the PPP to talk garbage, and we just leave it. It's like you made some comments which I responded to yesterday, and it is my intention to have a strong PR and communication unit that will respond, first of all, respond to everything they do, but secondly, put out new ideas and approaches out there. I think that is critical. Another critical area for me is to begin the process of educating and training first the leadership in the various communities, and secondly, the general public. When you have well-trained leaders in communities, it makes the work easier. And so I will make that as a priority. Another priority to me is to really get the party organized in a way that it starts to earn. It has to be a political organization that is business-oriented and involved in business. So those are some of the priorities at this stage that I would like to focus on and get the party up and running. But for me, everything rests on our ability to mobilize human resource support, because human resource is the key to achieving political objectives. You can have the world of money. If you don't have organization and the people to do it, then money wouldn't allow you to succeed.
Indeed, and in acquiring that organization, so that human element, I know, given the party structure, an important element of that structure is the general secretary. I know you hinted at wanting somebody that is acceptable to all, if I can paraphrase that. Have you decided on your general secretary yet?
I have engaged a person. I'm still working on it. I like when I do something, we spend a good bit of time talking so we understand each other. We develop a rapport so that whoever is working with me will have no fear in telling me exactly what they think rather than what I want to hear. So it's a work in progress.
A work in progress. A lot seem to, well, not seem, but a lot has actually, a lot has certainly been hinged on the finalization of the PNC's Congress and the election of a leader. People were so disgusted, if I can say that, with what was happening in the country, but at the same time they were taking hope, saying that as soon as Congress is over, the PPP will be confronted with all of these excesses and so on. Congress is over. You're the leader now. What can the average citizen expect from you in terms of dealing with the PPP and their excesses? We're talking about, for example, this Natural Resource Fund amendment is about to take place. We saw the passage of a supplementary budget mere days before the year end and so on. And this kind of abusive behavior, the discriminatory distribution of grants and other finances and so on to citizens across the country. Lots of billions being spent on Gaisiko as against pittances being thrown at the public servants. What can people expect?
People can expect a robust opposition to the excesses of the PPP. The opposition will take different forms. I don't want to get into it. The People's Progressive Party, I've said numerous times, seems not to understand press conferences, etc. And so we have to take the action that will ensure they recognize that we constitute more than half of the population if the election results were allowed to be free and fair, and that in essence they will be confronted. The party intention is to sensibly oppose the PPP and to place them on the back foot.
And given the current situation in terms of what's happening in Parliament, the PPP holds the majority in Parliament. The leader of the party currently is not the leader of the opposition in Parliament. Are we going to see any moves to, quote unquote, change the status quo in terms of leader of the opposition, leader of the PNCR?
Like I said before, I prefer to deal with those matters internally before I make public pronouncements. We are just out of a Congress. We have to have unity on the front burner, and we have to, in a very organized way, make the changes that are needed to ensure that we are on one page and that we can confront the PPP on the one hand and simultaneously strengthen the party on the other.
Very well. Let me turn you hinted at that statement or the rantings of Jagdeo over the holiday. As some would say, Jagdeo came swinging at you in terms of your popularity and quote-unquote lack of experience and matters like that. What interest is it to Jagdeo about what happens in the PNC and Corbyn Norton as leader of the PNC?
Well, first of all, it was evident to me from the inception that they're uncomfortable with me as leader of the PNCR. I think they know that they wouldn't get a free pass. They know my intention is to be on the ground and to work. And they know fully well that I will expose them. For instance, Jagdeo, who I have described as a demon, and I did that not because I want to categorize him, but because everything he does smacks demonic behavior. And so what I did is to respond to his hypocrisy. First of all, he tried to suggest that the Congress, 36% of the people turned up to vote at the Congress. Excuse me. No, that was misplaced. He used 3,000 as the figure. But what he did is he didn't recognize, or he didn't want to recognize, that Vincent Alexander never said 3,000 persons will be delegates. He says it can be in the vicinity of 3,000. It turned out after the accreditation process that there was 1,000 plus persons. When the calculation was done, it amounted to an 85% turnout. And so I thought he was trying to fudge the numbers to reduce the impact of the People's National Congress reform. He then suggested that more people should have voted because they were voting virtually, when he knew full well that voting was in person, except for for PNC members in the North American region. And he knew full well that voting was in person because his regime, his corrupt, divisive regime, saw one of our party comrades, the picture of that person voting at Congress Place on Saturday. And by Monday morning, they refused to pay her and they withdrew her contract. And this is for cleaning. It's not no sensitive job. You understand that they have to worry. But it is just in their nature to crucify anybody who they think oppose them in any fashion. And so they took away the contract. And so, again, when he talked about the impact of the Congress, by suggesting that people voted virtually and the fact that they didn't vote meant something, I had to point that out to him. And point out to him that people vote in person and that about 85% of the delegates voted. But most importantly, he tried to talk about popularity in election. And I said to him, you have no democratic right to talk about election. In the PPP, you do not allow democracy. I said, you yourself, you were handpicked by Janet Jagan. No process of election took you to. So you have no moral right to speak about elections. And so I responded to him in that regard. But I felt that the sole focus wasn't me. It was an attempt to shift the focus away from them butchering the Constitution to remove or to amend Article 22 so that they can thief the oil money. Look, everything here is focused on dismantling the institutions that were put in place to protect our oil resources, to create a free-for-all, so that Jagdo and his cronies can pillage our treasury. And I wanted to bring that out because he was seeking to shift away from the reality. I pointed out also the timings of the charging of Winston Jordan. They want to send a signal that Winston committed some crime because they know they are trying to dismantle a very good mechanism that was put in place by former Finance Minister Winston Jordan. And so they charge him at this time, and when they go to court, to Parliament, they'll be able to talk garbage. But the fact of the matter is, Winston Jordan, as Finance Minister, they put together with the legal people a bill which became law that creates a wide oversight committee that would have prohibited us when we're in government and them now that they're in government from squandering the funds. And Jagdeo doesn't like the idea of checks and balances and people not allowing him to operate as if he's a god. And in his demonic ways, he's proceeding to dismantle that. And what is interesting is not the president that made the pronouncement on this. It's President 1, not President 2. It is Jagdeo who made the announcement. So it is a careful plot to browbeat people so that they can open the doors to be able to access our resources and to squander them. So that to me had to be responded to, because the Guyanese people must know that this amendment is not an amendment that is in the interest of the people of Guyana. It is an amendment to create the conditions for the PPP elite to thief. That is the reality.
But it's an amendment that is likely to be passed, given what's happening in the National Assembly. Is there any other route being considered to, as we say, put a spoke in the wheel of this amendment?
Look, the government has the majority. And unless they go to good reasoning, they will pass it. But we have got to give them hell, including mobilizing the international community against them. Now, let's assume that they want to pass the bill. At minimum, it should have gone to a select committee so that there could be more views, the public could be invited to deal with it, etc. But they are only interested in putting their hands on the oil money. And so we have got to mobilize our people, the international community, civil society, and take on the People's Progressive Party on this issue. That even if they pass it, they will have to seriously consider relooking what they are doing. It is so obvious that they are putting a machinery in place to be able to thief. And I believe we will get the message out, and in due time they will have to pull back on this matter.
Let's hope so indeed. Following your victory, a number of persons have issued congratulatory statements, including the ambassador to the US, Sarah Ann Lynch. Immediately after the elections, the declarations and continuing, persons have been calling for her removal from Guyana because they believe that she had a hand in effecting regime change. This very individual has expressed the interest of working with you as leader of the PNC in terms of, I think she said, common interests of Guyanese and US citizens. What's your position on the removal of Sarah Ann Lynch as ambassador and working with her?
Well, first of all, I don't know that she expressed an interest in working with me. An ambassador is a representative of the government of the United States. Sarah Ann Lynch, while the Trump was in place, represented the US interests as they perceive it. Now, we were totally opposed to it, and we continue to be opposed to how it was handled. But at present, we're seeing foreign policy changes in the United States. We know, for instance, that her term will come to an end. And I believe that as sensible political people, we should not state to a State Department that is clearly signaling changes that we're not going to meet with your rep. We will meet with the rep. We will identify and make clear the disagreements we have, and we will point the new direction that relationship between the PNCR and the United States should go. And I believe that that makes political sense. I also must point out that I see it not as an endorsement of Aubrey Norton. I see it as the United States acknowledging that the process in the PNCR was transparent, free, fair, and democratic, and that they are in large measure embracing a democratic approach. I know for a fact that it is very difficult for them to continue to embrace the PPP, because it is evident to all that the PPP does not embrace democracy. Everything that the PPP is doing could be considered anti-democratic. And therefore, at this stage, I don't believe there can be a confluence of interests between the People's Progressive Party and the United States. The United States at present promoting democratic values, etc., and at the same time watching the PPP remove Article 22. They would have observed that they are not putting the relevant commissions in place. They are violating the Constitution in relation to the Procurement Commission and just doling out the resources. So by the the nature of the PPP under Jack Day and Irfan Ali is that it has become a party of hustlers. And so no principle matters except we want to get rich. They want to get rich. And so there is a contradiction between democratic principles and the approach of the PPP. And I believe that because of the nature of how the PPP operates, they will find themselves on the wrong side of the democratic divide. They are not democratic. Everything they do could be considered undemocratic, most of it. And therefore, I do not think they can continue to get support from the ADCE countries, because this is the second time around, and it will be evident to all that they are not a democratic apparatus. And we have not even mentioned the method by which Irfan Ali would have come to leadership in the party, being handpicked by Jack Deal, but he himself was handpicked, so handpicking is normal. And so the intention is to meet with the United States at the appropriate time and to lay the cards on the table and have a discussion, an approach that will mutually benefit Guyana and the United States of America.
The PPP, a party of hustlers, generally endorsed by the Private Sector Commission. I think you have knocked heads, if I can call it that, with the Private Sector Commission recently. There's some who believe that you should be working, if I can say that loosely, with the PPP. There's some who believe that you ought to take a position that you should be should soften your current stance and try to convince others that they can work with you, and you should be working towards getting crossover votes, as they deemed it. But yet there's that statement attributed to you referring to the PSC as political.
Well,
how do you see the PSC's stance versus your stance, and how do you see the Aubrey Norton as leader of the PNC possibly working with the Private Sector Commission, possibly softening your stance on the PPP?
Well, I don't know that I have to soften a factual comment. I have drawn a distinction between the Private Sector Commission and the private sector. If one looks at the Private Sector Commission, one sees one group keep rotating all the time. First thing, if one looks at the Private Sector Commission, one sees the very characters aligning with the PPP and taking positions in consonance with the PPP. Now, Guyanese should know that the PSC is supposed to be a civil society organization. A civil society organization seeks to promote the interests of that organization. In this case, they are purporting or claiming to represent the private sector. My argument is simple. The vast majority of the private sector, of all ethnic groups, they are not in the Private Sector Commission. And therefore, the Private Sector Commission does not represent the totality of the business community. Once we draw those two distinctions, we can come now to our mode of operation. I said I am disposed to meet with the Private Sector Commission. But in meeting with the Private Sector Commission, I don't have to soften my position. In fact, I would call on them to widen and democratize the commission. And I would be happy if the commission reflects the business community. As it stands, it doesn't. And then there's another argument that needs to be debunked. Increasing crossover votes has nothing to do with the private sector commission, though it will have to do with the private sector. And I believe a lot of people in the private sector would like to have a say. For instance, if you look at what is happening in oil and gas, we could talk what we want about local content. It is that same cabal, that same small group that will benefit. But it is not structured to ensure the wider cross-section of businesses of all ethnic groups benefit. And that must worry Guyanese. Because whenever you concentrate wealth in the hands of the few, and then you put wage increases in the way that this government is doing it, what you do is have a large amount of wealth at the top, but with few people, and widespread poverty in the mass of the society. And we have got to ensure that the private sector serves businesses in the private sector and not a little group that gets richer and richer at the expense of all of us. The resources in this country, they are the resources of the people. And as far as is practically possible, the people should benefit. As things are presently constituted, the private sector commission, in my opinion, has not taken the requisite actions to ensure that private businesses benefit. And so, to me, dealing with crossover vote has to do with doing work in those communities and having a robust education program that will allow those people, all Guyanese, to understand that they are being deprived and that a vote for the PPP is not in the interest of their development. If you look at how they did the flood relief, a small group virtually ended up with billions, and the wide expanse of farmers of all ethnic groups did not get the requisite assistance. And so the PPP cannot claim to have helped the farmers. They have used the resources of Guyana to enrich the few that are close to them, and they have created controversy amongst farmers by handpicking those that they want to give a lot of resources to and giving them, then giving another group some, but depriving a large section of the agriculture community who would have had losses of actual, genuine help. And so we have got to carve the messages and speak to all ethnic groups. For instance, in the indigenous communities, we showed that we were going to teach them to fish so that they can earn a living and develop. Because while we talk about African Guyanese being marginalized, etc., the same thing is true for the indigenous communities. And we have got to meet out to them and to sell them policies and programs that will seek to empower them and allow them to develop, rather than this approach where the PPP goes in with handouts, rather than allowing them to develop the skills to be able to feed themselves and become sustainable villages. Our focus has to be on educating the indigenous communities. We will tell them to take what the PPP has to offer, because it's our resources. But we have to instill in those communities that that approach will not allow you and your children to develop, and that we will carry them in the direction of small businesses, education and training that will allow them to become sustainable villages. I believe that approach will help us to obtain votes rather than some chumminess with the private sector that serves to intensify wealth in a polarized fashion.
And so we come to the important issue of votes. And when you talk votes, you talk elections. We saw the recent selection of Vishnu Prasad, is it? As the Chief Elections Officer at GCOM, despite the fact that his credentials, etc., did not necessarily support that choice. Also, we heard him making utterances to the extent that local government elections may be possible in the new year. Have you set your eyes on what is happening at GCOM, and how do you intend to deal with, first and foremost, Vishnu Prasad as CEO, and secondly, let's say the current electoral role if you're going to go to local government elections in the new year?
Well, first of all, I think we need to emphasize that we need a clean voters list. Elections without a clean voters list will create the conditions for fraud. And we will mobilize locally and internationally to ensure there is a clean voters list. That is the first thing. Secondly, as it relates to the Elections Commission, I've made a number of statements. At the time, I wasn't leading the party. Now I'm leading the party. I have to sit with the central executive of the party and discuss this issue. I then have to engage the commissioners, get their perspective, and then fine-tune the plans we have for moving forward. There are three common trends that run through. One, the need for a clean list. Two, the need for a new chairman. And four, the need for the appointment of a professional person who suits the job rather than a person who is not qualified for the job. Neither certified nor qualified.
Thank you. It's now 8 hours 51. That gives us 9 minutes to the 9 o'clock hour, which is program time. I'll give you the opportunity to make any closing statements you want.
I would like, first of all, to thank all of your viewers who supported me, and even those who didn't, while I was running for leader of the People's National Congress Reform. While many might say they played no role since they weren't delegates, I disagree. I believe they played an important role. I believe that public opinion does impact the public, and to the extent that public opinion moves in the direction of supporting me, I think a word of thanks and appreciation to all your viewers, including those who are delegates, those who are members, and those who are supporters of the party. So I want to say a special thank you for them. I want to also, at this stage, say to you that I believe your program has contributed to the education of our people. And sometimes we take for granted the work that people like you do. And so this opportunity is taken to say thank you. It was a great initiative. It continues to impact. And so I wish you and your listening and viewing audience all the best as we look forward to a 2022 in which we represent our people and keep the PPP in check and and make them accountable.
Thank you, leader of the PNCR, Mr. Aubrey Norton. Do have a pleasant rest of the day. I myself must thank you for your appearances here. It's always a pleasure having you talk to the people because, like we all know, politicians generally are dependent on the people for their support. And the people themselves are dependent on politicians' guidance. So it's a two-way street. Once again, thank you very much for your appearances. I look forward to having you on the program again. Because of the shortness of time, obviously, there are lots of other ideas, areas I would have liked to go, but we will go there eventually. I understand you're on Dr. Hinds' Politics 101 tomorrow, so let me encourage viewers to tune in to Politics 101 with the leader of the PNCR, Mr. Aubrey Norton, right here on KAMSTV tomorrow in the evening time. Mr. Norton, have a good day, and I wish you all the best for the new year. Thank you very much.
Thanks a lot.
Okay, viewers, you're still tuned to KAMSTV, BUXTONIAN Morning Time, and we were chatting there with leader of the PNCR. Some would say newly minted leader of the PNCR, Mr. Aubrey Norton. You would have had the opportunity to hear some of the things on his mind. As we like to say, we were able to pick his mind, and so you are better informed now as to what you can expect moving forward. There were a couple of voice notes. I'm not sure what those are about, but I will play them and as we wrap up the program.
Why not let the United Nations run the elections in Guyana?
All right, so that's a thought there from one of the voice noters to the United Nations to run elections in Guyana whenever that time comes.
Good morning, Mr. Amsterdam. It's not just the teachers have the expense of making the aids. The teachers send to the parents, and so the parents also have to either send money or buy some of the things for the aids. I have experienced that as a grandparent.
Good, and so you have had inputs into both segments of discussion. One is about the teachers and Satirigal and licensing and the setting the systems and providing the resources necessary instead of talking about licensing teachers so you can control them. Yes, not only teachers bear that burden, parents also bear that burden. Imagine in this year and time, parents will still ask for contributions to paint classrooms.
Conniving morning, when you had your pocket full, in a bill there'll be morning. Now because your money done, you hustle for tell me morning. Yes, morning, neighbor. Morning, neighbor, morning. Morning, neighbor, morning. Morning, I don't want you conniving morning. Neighbor, neighbor, joker. Neighbor, neighbor, joker. Neighbor, neighbor, joker. That's all the money that me walk for. A 2 pound note and a guilder piece. A 2 pound note and a guilder piece. A 2 pound note and a guilder piece. This is all the money that me walk for. I said money neighbor, money neighbor, money, money neighbor, money, money. I don't want you conniving money. Oh Joseph. Never Joe, never Joe, never Joe. Oh, money, neighbor, money, neighbor, money, money, neighbor, money, money. I don't want you conniving money. Money, neighbor, money, neighbor, money, money, neighbor, money, because your money done, you come with conniving morning. Then you had your pocket full,
You know, been tell me morning.
now because your money done, you hustle for tell me morning.
Morning, neighbor.
Morning, neighbor, morning. Morning, neighbor, morning. Morning, I know what you conniving morning. Neighbor, neighbor, joker. Neighbor, neighbor, joker. Neighbor, neighbor, joker. That's all the money that me work for. A 2 pound note and a guilder piece. A 2 pound note and a guilder piece. A 2 pound note and a guilder piece. This is all the money that me work for. Morning, neighbor,
Morning, neighbor.
morning, neighbor, morning. Morning, I know what you conniving morning. Oh, Joseph.
Oh, Joseph, for me. Oh, Joseph, for me. Oh, Guyanese, for me. Morning, neighbor, morning. Welcome to another program of BUXTONIAN Morning Time. It is 2 minutes past the 7 o'clock hours. 2 minutes past the 7 o'clock hour. On the 28th day of December in the year 2021. Yes, 2021, a very interesting year, is it? Yes, very, very interesting year. A year in which we're getting to see all the colors of the PPP. PPP is in their glory. Yes, they're doing as they like, when they like, how they like, to who they like, and with whom they like. Right? But what are we doing as citizens? What will we do as citizens? We're approaching the time of the year when people are starting to make resolutions. New Year's resolutions, they call them. What will be your New Year's resolution? I wonder. Because I have already made my resolution. I didn't only make it now. I made it a long time ago. And that resolution is that I'm prepared to fight tooth and nail for democracy in this country. I'm prepared to fight tooth and nail for fairness and equity in this country. I am willing to give up some freedoms so that this nation can be free of a kleptocratic, divisive, racist, corrupt, criminal cabal known as the PPP. So I've made my resolution already. I don't know what your resolutions are, but I've made mine. And we ought to resolve, I think, each and every one of us, we ought to resolve to not sit back and allow the PPP to continue to do as they wish to the people of this country and with the resources of this country. The time has come for us to stop crying, complaining, and really act. Really act. In that discussion with the leader of the PNCR, we were told that, you know, the PPP has the majority in Parliament, so they're going to pass the amendment to the Natural Resource Fund Act. They will pass the amendment. It will pass. But while we know or we expect it to be passed in the National Assembly, what should have been happening is that thousands of citizens should have been in front of the National Assembly, chanting it down. And so as the world looks on, they won't only see the PPP passing the amendments, but they will see the citizens of the nation detesting the amendment, chanting them down. And until we as a people can come to the position where we are willing to stand up in public places and, as they say, put our money where our mouths are, and show to the world that we don't agree with this onward march of the PPP to rob this nation, to rob the citizens of this nation, among other things. We are going to continue to hold the short end of the stick as citizens. And so I'm encouraging you. New Year is approaching, new mindset, new action, new approach must be taken to dealing with the PPP. That's my resolve. I've already made my resolution. I don't know about you. It is 7 minutes past the 7 o'clock hour. It's another Tuesday. And of course, we're going to have the doctor in the house. Dr. David Hinds is going to join us. And so let me welcome Dr. Hinds to Buxtonian Morning Time once more. And don't stand between you and him. Dr. Hinds, welcome to the program. Good morning. Dr. Hinds, welcome to the program. Good morning. It seems as though the weather is giving Dr. Hinds a problem, a challenge. Internet connectivity in this country, at least in certain parts of this country, gets really, really bad when it rains. And so it would appear as though we are faced with such challenge this morning. Good morning, Dr. Hinds.
Hello.
Welcome to the program. Can you hear us, sir? Hello? Doctor? Dr. Hinds? Dr. Hinds seems to be having some technical difficulties. I hope they don't last too long. Dr. Hinds, good morning. Dr. Hinds, good morning. Welcome to the Buxtonian Morning Time.
Hello.
Good morning,
here.
sir.
Good morning.
Welcome to the program. It seems you're having some technical difficulties over there, man.
Well, I hope it doesn't last for too long.
All right. So let's talk. It's another Tuesday. It's the 28th day of December. Taking you back in time, normally on the 28th of December, it would have been the Dem Brothers Dance.
Yes. It used to be the biggest dance in our village there.
Don't come and go out with sense and expense.
Yes, in those days, dance was dance.
It's quite interesting that you say those days dance was dance, because I want to pick your mind now. What you consider dance to be nowadays?
The thing has evolved. When I said dance was dance back in those days, and the 28 people will be well dressed. They dress their best, and I remember as a little boy seeing, because rain would fall every 28th, and
like
people coming out. Yes, people come out with boats from the back dam side and come to the line and finish dressing and go off to the party well decked out, and you go into the party and you felt as though you were in the biggest event of the year. And these days, that form of partying is gone. And it's more partying to keep up with the times. Young people have developed new ways of enjoying themselves, new kind of music. And so, you know, one of the things that we're certain of is change. And those of us who are older will look back with nostalgia. The young people don't have that to look back on. So the way they enjoy themselves is normative for them. So we have to live with change, you know. But the big point is that back then, the 28th was a cultural event. It wasn't just about people going out and having fun. It was one of the biggest days on the calendar of the village. You know, and that is what was important. We had these days, these events that people look forward to. And so, you know, that significance is what, you know, I think the communities can do with, you know, where party is not always about, you know, paying your money, going and drink liquor and beer and carry on. But it's also a time where people get to meet and to doesn't get a chance every day to dress up to his best or her best, and or you know the homemaker has to stay home with the chair. She gets a chance on that night to leave the children, as Black Stallion said. Tonight we going out and lime. You know, tonight the black man come out to party. It was that kind of thing. And I think we miss that. We miss that, you know. But time goes on and time rolls on. And we've got to roll on with the times.
So true. You know, partying now is like you said, is a different thing. People see it as just the opportunity to carry on. As I like to say, drink liquor for long and get stupid. I mean, I'm not knocking the young generation, but when you see some of the things that happen at parties nowadays, you cannot go to an average party or a dance, as we call them, and not hear gunshots. The youngsters are so wild now. Christmas Day, for example, I had to rent my tent to a host. And when I collected it Boxing morning, there were 2 gunshot holes in the canopy. Right? So it points to some kind of craziness among our youths, man. You're on the tent, boss, and you're licking shot. I remember a few months ago in the year, a venue owner had a confrontation with a guy who was, the party was under the owner's house basically, and the guy was licking shot from under the house, almost killed an in-law.
Yes, it's a serious situation. I would say it's a degeneration. That I would call a degeneration. I mean, and you know, we have to look after those things. You know, it's the responsibility of all of us, religious organizations, civil society organizations, political organizations. You see, look, we have to balance change with civility, you know. I understand young people are doing things their way. I have absolutely no problems with that. I am prepared to accommodate change and to roll with it. But I think even as we do things in new ways, we still have to remember there's some basic things about human existence that we have to preserve. Civility, no matter, you know, shooting up a gun in a party is not the way to go. It's not new, Kidaki. We had in the late 1960s, early 1970s, the rude boy phenomenon. It originated in Jamaica, you know, man going party with guns slinging and bow. It's not new. We had the rude boy phenomenon. But that the society took care of that very quickly, because too many young people were wasting their lives. So in a sense, this gun thing that we are seeing is not new. It has come back in a different way. I suppose there are more guns around today than there were 40 and 50 years ago. And but we have to get our society back to basic things like civility, and there's a time and place for everything, and the importance of life. I think that is where the problem is, the value of life. I think that's the basis of the degeneration that we're seeing. Is there is no value that is put on life. Now, there's always dangerous driving, but I have never in my life seen the type of dangerous driving that I see on the roads in Guyana. And I've traveled a few places, and I've seen dangerous driving, but I can tell you, Guyana has the most dangerous driving culture I have seen anywhere that I have traveled in the world. And again, it comes back to life. Do you value life? How you value life? If you value life and you go behind that wheel, you will be thinking about saving your life, the lives of the people in your vehicle, and the lives of the people on the road and in other vehicles. And so in the sense that we value money over life, that minibus driver is going to run the road, stop in the middle of the road, pull out without signaling, because he's concerned about making as much money as possible at the expense of life. And I think that's where we have got to do. Well, we have politicians who order people to be killed, order the police to brutalize people. Those things have always been there. But there is more violence in the society, to the mindless violence, than I have ever seen in my, relatively long life. But like I said, at the end of the day is how much do we value life? And that is not something that you buy in the shop. That is not something you acquire when you go to do a driving test for license. Those are things you acquire as you grow up, from a child, you acquire it in your schools, in your churches, in your clubs, in your communities, in the films that you see on TV. That's where you acquire that value for life. And I'm afraid we don't have the same value for life as we used to.
I dare argue that another contributory factor, if it wasn't clearly stated, is the political situation, the conditions created by politicians for these recklessness to continue, if I can call them that.
Well, yeah, and you're
have you recognized a notable difference in this kind of recklessness when the PPP is in power versus when they are not in power?
Look, let me talk about the general situation as far as politics and violence are concerned. It is not new. Again, we go back to the days of political gangs. They were always a part of modern politics. I don't want to beat up on Jamaica, but the whole question of garrison politics, it's there. Edward Seaga, in I think 1965 or thereabout, made a speech in Jamaica in which he said it will be blood and fire. And therein was born the garrison politics in Jamaica, which to some extent is there to this day. And it has spread to the rest of the Caribbean, right? And so gang politics has always been there. I don't want to knock these young people to say they're doing things that generation before didn't do. But it's the way in which the thing has become the norm. It has become normative back then I think the gangsters knew they were doing something that was wrong. A lot of them in later life would go on to turn their lives around and to mentor young people turn away from violence. I think the thing about the violence today is the ease with which you can buy a gun. I don't want to sound like them arrogant, but it is also true in our society. The ease with which you can buy a gun. As I said, the way in which you can look at another person and take their life without even thinking about the repercussions. In fact, I think a lot of the youngsters who are committing violence don't even think there will be repercussions. You know, repercussions serve as a deterrence. And I wouldn't want to get into that business, Gaddafi, of comparing which government there is more violence and there is not violence. We know that the PPP, as part of its governance, is that it engages in a certain kind of jungle politics, because it believes that the only way it can survive in Guyana is to control the streets of Georgetown. And it has decided the way to do that is to engage in the phantom politics. So the phantom politics, where you hire gangsters and mobsters and they rule the road and they enforce on your behalf. The PPP has made that part of their praxis. And so, yes, you will see, whenever they're in power, an increase in that type of violence. But I don't think we should get away with that, because what happens is that when the PPP leaves office, that kind of violence doesn't necessarily go away. It's there because it becomes numb. The phantoms are still running the road. The phantoms are still running things in communities. And it took a concerted effort on the part of the coalition not to end that kind of mobster phantom violence, but to put a brake on it. And the minute they left office, it's back, because it never left. So while it's easy to say we see an increase in violence, that kind of violence when the PPP comes to office, suggesting that as soon as the other side comes to office, it goes, I think doesn't capture the dynamics of the situation. These things become endemic in the society, right? The youngsters, little boys are growing up, this is what they're seeing. And they're not making a distinction between when the PPP is in office and when the coalition or the PNC is in office. It becomes the norm. And I think for me, that's where the emphasis has to be, what it is to be a human being. What is the value you place on life, regardless of who is in power? And sometimes you have to take the politics out of it so that the citizens can see the human value. You see, when you mix the politics with things that have to do with the value of the human life, sometimes we judge these issues based on our political lens. That is why I'm trying to take the political lens out of it and to say that we are a crisis in the society, regardless of who governs. And we have to tackle that crisis. And since we don't have a national approach to tackling it, I think, you know, every cow have a cry for calf. And we in the African Guyanese community, we have to recognize that there is a way in which this thing operates in our community that makes us a little bit more vulnerable than other communities. You know, the crave for money, the systemic and endemic and acute poverty, which makes us easy prey for those who want to hire gunmen. We have to be frank with ourselves to say that all communities are exposed when it comes to this thing, because you know the Indian Guyanese community have their fair share of mobsters. You know, I'm not trying to say Indians here, they are as ravaged by the thing. The Indian young men and women, they play their music louder than black people. You know, they feel that black people are low life and so on, and some of them, but they don't mind playing the low life music, you know. And but what I'm saying, that community has some checks and balances inside of the community that helps them to treat with the issue better. Our community don't have the same checks and balances. Our cultural moorings are not as strong because, you know, we overextend ourselves on politics and religion, and I'm talking about religion in an abstract way, and we don't pay attention to the actual moorings of the society, the mores of the society. The church is now isolated from the society around them. We go to church and we sing and we preach among ourselves. We no longer take our evangelism and our witnesses to the street corners. We are concerned only with those of us who are saved, and we don't work with the quote-unquote unsaved as we used to. So our religious leaders and organizations are as guilty as the political organizations and political people. And I think in the Indian Guyanese community, they do, I think, from my observation, I may be wrong, things may have deteriorated badly there too. But I think their religious organizations have always done a better job of, well, not have always done a better job. I think they've always done a good job at trying to use religion as a means of socializing the young people. That too, in the Indian community, may have gone awry. I may be thinking that it's not as bad there as it is, but I don't know that community as well as I know our community. And you know, our religious, look, big people can't talk to young people on the road anymore. They're afraid. Perhaps they're wrong. Perhaps they need to confront young people and withstand the abuse to get to the young people. But a lot of older people have withdrawn. They can't take the abuse. Young people no longer see the elders in our communities in the same light. So it's a wide and a very complex issue that we can't really discuss in any really serious way in a couple of minutes. But I just wanted to highlight that to say that what we see in the dance halls today are not the cause of the problem. Those things we see are the consequences of the problem or the symptoms of the problem rather than the problem. The problem goes deeper.
Thank you for that in-depth explanation in as little time as we have. Let us turn our attention to changes. You said you could roll with changes. You basically could deal with changes. But can you really deal with the changes that the PPP is about to make with the Natural Resource Fund? We know that when the David Granger administration put together that Natural Resource Fund Act, there were what we consider certain safeguards. Mainly that oversight committee of 12 or 21 persons who would basically watch over with eagle's eyes, if I can say that, how the fund is being used and so on. You had to go to Parliament to get basically clearance to use the money in particular ways. So there had to be accountability. The PPP is now moving to Parliament to dismantle that act. In short, what they're doing is reduce the size of the oversight committee to 5. And those 5 are going to be chosen by the president, and the chairman is going to be identified by the president. Right? I also, there's a paragraph, an article of that amendment, which says that as soon as this act comes into, is given life, they can move to withdraw the total accumulated fund, total accumulated amount in the fund when the act is given life later this year or so. Is that the kind of change that you can roll with?
No law is perfect. I have had my criticisms of the National Resource Fund. Our own party has had our criticisms of it. Because it's the way in which the fund was set up, it makes certain assumptions about third world countries. And one of those assumptions that is made is that, you know, we are inherently corrupt cultures, and when there's plenty money, you need to hide it far away from us. No, I reject that assumption. I think corruption is part of all societies. Large societies, small societies, Caribbean societies, North American, European societies. And I reject this whole notion that you have to hide our money away from us because historically we are kleptomaniacs. I reject that. And I think the way in which the National Resource Fund was set up assumes that. Now, when you look at the PPP and the way it is going about, then in a sense, they are justifying the assumptions by those who came up with this model. I think they call it the Argentinian model. The PPP's attitude is justifying that. In fact, when you look at the PPP, you're saying it is parties and governments like the PPP that these people had in mind when they came up with this model. That is to hide the money far away, don't spend the money, don't make it easy for you to access the money and all of that kind of stuff. The money is sitting in a New York bank rather than in our central bank and all that kind of stuff, right? So I'm saying that to say that, look, this bill is not perfect. But one of the things that you have to commend the present law for is the checks and balances. I am not opposed to checks and balances. And so therefore, while I may have thought or I may think that you can't make it so difficult to access your own money, and you can't imprison your own money in somebody else's bank somewhere. Having said that, I have to say that you also, at the other end, cannot have a resource fund in which there are not checks and balances. My audiences will know that I always use the term balance. You have to strike a balance. You have to strike a balance between accessibility to your own money that you can use as you feel like. But you have to have checks and balances. You can't be treating the thing like that. Now, these are things, and for me, the question here is not so much how one party or one government, these things. The question here is that you have to have a national approach to these things. This is money that we never had before. It's a lot of money in a divided society in which the question of distribution of resources is contested. And so therefore, whatever checks and balances you put in place must have consensus. You must have consensus. And we can't have one party deciding that, look, the way to deal with what could be perceived as imprisonment of your money is to remove all checks and balances and put whatever little flimsy checks you're putting in the hands of the government. If you're doing that, that's not checks and balances. You're saying that the government here is checking itself. The law as it stands, says that, look, we're going to have some civil society organization that will be the check. Now, what the PPP is saying, we don't want civil society organizations to check. We want the government to be our check. That's essential. Forget about the 22 and 9, because numbers don't determine whether there is check or not. It is the character of the checks. And the PPP is saying here, these organizations are straw organizations. The Bar Association and the Press Association, they don't represent anybody. And you know, this thing is coming back to roots. We like, and it happens on our side. You always hear people say, you know, this party not bring nothing to the table. This party and get members, this party and get followers. So we nullify those who do not, to the naked eye, have 1 million members, 1,000 members. And that's what the PPP is using, our own chat, as I call it, against us. They're saying these 22 organizations that the law provides for, they don't have following. This is what Jack Dio said. They don't have following. So we are going to create a watchdog committee with groups that have following. And we are going to, in the final analysis, give the president the power to decide which group has following. Granger did that. And I want to point out to our people where philosophy is important. Granger decide how many seats the WPA will get. You know, we get a set of votes, 200 and something votes, and he decide who gets 7,000, and who gets 3,000, and who gets 200,000. And Jacko is doing that now. He's deciding which organizations got members, and is passing a law based on that. And sometimes, as I said, we have to think about how things operate culturally. It's a thinking. It's a thinking. So what the PPP is doing is not so much reducing the numbers, but they are determining which organizations have representation in the society, and therefore which organizations can be the watchdogs. And they are deciding that in their infinite wisdom, as Mr. Granger uses infinite wisdom to determine who gets too much vote and who gets too much. There is a way in which the culture, the political culture, allows certain things. And so that is what we are facing. Now, civil society organizations are now coming out and criticizing the PPP. Only when they are affected, you know? The PPP is getting rid of them, so they ain't got members, they ain't got... A lot of them line up to put the PPP in power last year or were silent. And now the PPP is sucking it to them. They're now opening them out. Oh, I always say, I welcome those who helped the PPP power last year. I welcome their criticism and hopefully protest and resistance against the PPP. But you cannot put a beast in power and expect it to behave like a lamb. Let me repeat. You cannot install a beast to power and expect it to govern like a lamb. And that is what these people who develop that stupidness about democracy, which says that you have two contestants in an election, both of them are making charges that elections are not free and fair. You then ignore the evidence presented by one side and go ahead and install the other side. And what do you expect? They're going to change every law that they see in sight that they don't like, which then makes it more difficult to confront them because you have legitimized them, and now they're acting based on this so-called legitimacy. The PPP can criticize anybody. You know, they can criticize judges. They can criticize politicians. They can criticize church people. But they are beyond criticism. When you criticize them, you're violating laws. When they criticize you, it's free speech. When you criticize them, you're violating laws and they put out wanted bulletin for you. That is the kind of political environment you create when at an election you deem one side evil and the other side good. Because those who you deem good will always see it as their divine right to nullify the presence of the evil. And that is what we are reaping here. That is what we are reaping here. It is not just a government wanting to have its way. All governments want to have their way. But it's the way in which this government perceives itself as being divinely endowed, divinely put in place to do whatever it feels. It makes laws to punish its opponents, not laws to protect the society. It makes laws to take away the right of oversight of our funds from the opposition, not laws to give the society. Oh, Jagdio says the opposition will have oversight. Well, you're giving the opposition one member in a committee of 9 and say, oh, the opposition would have a say. So this is what that change is all about. It's about giving ultimate power to the PPP to determine what happens with the money that comes in. Unlimited power they're giving themselves. They're using this democracy that a lot of people prat and said they saved last year. This democracy that they saved last year is a democracy that takes away power, institutional power, even from them, and installing it in the hands of the ruling party.
And so in the whole interest of what I would want to call fairness and transparency, some of the very organizations which enabled the PPP, supported them, put them in power, whatever, are complaining, like you rightly said. Glenn Lal, who was extremely critical of the APNU AFC administration, especially leading up to the elections, for the last few months have been critical of the PPP. And he's a TikToker now. And I understand that the Vice President Jagdio has really gone hard at him for TikToking. I'm sure you would have paid some attention to that.
Yes, it's a story in the Kaichor News today. I don't mind Glenlal being critical of the coalition and being critical of the PPP. That's what citizens ought to do. I don't have a problem with that. My problem is not the criticism. My problem is when you aid and abet. You aid and abet regime change. And that is my quarrel with Brother Glenn and all the others. It is not the criticism of the coalition. It is the regime change where, with their eyes open, they installed one party against the wishes of the population in total. They decide that they are only going to decide an election on one set of evidence. I saw Mr. Schumann in the Village Voice this weekend reacting to Dharamlal and the Attorney General harsh treatment of the justices in the Supreme Court, implying that why are they trying to hide? Why do they not want a petition to go forward? And he's saying, let us have a petition and find out once and for all what happened at the election and settle it. The PPP is deathly afraid of a petition hearing. They're deathly afraid of that. The evidence is there. You and I know it's there, it's sitting. The results of the recount order, they're sitting there. The PPP does not want that evidence to be laid in a court of law. They pretend it's not there. Stabrook News pretend it's not there. Kaichor News pretend it's not there. They all pretend that what came out of the recount exists. And Jack Dio is talking about criticism of the judiciary. No, I don't have a problem with criticizing the results of the judiciary. And the judges decide on a case, and you criticize the decisions. Nothing is wrong with that. You criticize their rulings. But one branch of the court, one branch of the judiciary, because that branch of the judiciary doesn't rule the way you think they should rule. You're doing two things. You are attacking the integrity of the court in general. Because when you think you're just attacking the appeal court, in effect what you are doing, you're undermining the entire judiciary. And then Jack Diot says, and the second thing you're doing is that you are in effect saying the other two levels of the court, the High Court and the CCJ, are politically in your favor. So you are politicizing the court. And you're doing that while you're charging the court of being political in its ruling. It is you who are being political. Because you're attacking the court that doesn't rule in your favor. And you are praising the levels of the court that rule in your favor. It is you, Mr. Jack Dio, who is politicizing the court. And then he talks about we need a new model, but he can't come up with a model. I don't know what model. We need a model like the Americans where you criticize the court as if the American court doesn't make political rulings. The American court is perhaps the most politicized court in the world, because the American court is made up of conservatives and liberals, Democrats and Republicans. And Mr. Jack Dio is saying we should emulate that court without going into any details. But he doesn't like the fact that the PPP does not control the court, or that the court is not ruling in the PPP's favor sometimes. Therefore, the PPP and Jack Dio are not prepared to accept an independent court. They want a court that rules in their favor. The court is independent only when it rules in their favor. When it doesn't rule in their favor, it's political. See, these chaps are trying to rewrite the whole meaning of things. They're trying to rewrite the meaning of democracy. They probably succeed in doing that. Now they're trying to rewrite what an independent court is. That is why our academics and our lawyers need to get their butts into the public arena and do public education. Do public education to counter the miseducation that the PPP is trying to pursue. Changing the meaning of what democracy means. Changing the meaning of what racism means. Changing the meaning of what an independent court means. I hear Aubrey Norton says that he will beef up his PR team. But I always say it's not just PR, because PR is public relations. It is the content of your PR. Because if you PR in stupidness, you're still unsolving the problem. If you PR in content which does not sway your people one way or the other, you're missing the mark. So I always say the problem is not PR. The problem is getting people who are knowledgeable on these issues. Because the PR person is not necessarily knowledgeable of the issues. You have to have, first of all, have content. You have to, first of all, define democracy in a plural society and then PR it. So that you're countering the meaning of democracy. You have to have people who understand race and racism, that can define what is racialism versus what is racism, and then PR it. You see? So our problem is not PR. Our problem is the content of our public education. And we have to have people who are trained and knowledgeable in these areas to provide the content that we then PR. And I think we are falling behind because, for example, these people's definition of democracy, is confined to some stupid election. And I don't mean to say election is stupidness. When I say some stupid election, something they concoct in their heads, that we had some election that was so free and fair that we saved democracy. It means they concoct that election in their head as opposed to the actual election. Because the actual election really reflected a crisis in our electoral democracy. And secondly, elections by themselves do not define democracy. Elections are one plank of democracy. You can hold 1 million elections, and if at the end of those elections, you have a government that does not engage in economic democracy, meaning distributing resources equitably, you still don't have a democracy. In fact, democratic elections can throw up dictatorships. Just ask the Americans and Trump. So this nonsense that an election in which there are questions by all sides, but the other side don't matter. So you decide an election by something called Mingo and tell us that is democracy. It's nonsense. And we have to spell those things out them out there in the public domain. The narrative about what happened last year has been given a lot of power by the mainstream media, the Kaitor News and the Stabrook News and them, who not only carry that narrative, but they deny people like myself the right to give a counter narrative. Zilch, nothing. And so we have to resort to these spaces. But we have to do a better job at redefining reality in Guyana.
The reality in Guyana. Criticisms. Enablers. Schumann, you mentioned Schumann. Schumann was one of the enablers. Schumann was in bed with the PPP. I say was because it would appear as though there's a royal falling out between them. He has come out in recent times critical of some of the actions of the PPP. And Dharamlal in particular really went at him. And I read recently that he's quoting the APNU, the PNC for membership. Have you seen that report, and is there any...
I've seen something that he's in talks with Norton about joining the APNU. Schumann was given a chance to join the APNU. He had talks with Granger, and then he decided to pitch his tent on the other side. You know, all of us have sinned and come short of the glory of God, and so I am not knocking the brother overly. You know, I'm glad that he has seen the light, and you know, he's coming out and lending his voice to the anti-dictatorial resistance. I think for me that is what is important, but he must be reminded that in politics, you sometimes have to make tough decisions and not take things at face value. You know, I maintain that democracy in Guyana, in countries like Guyana, are not just about counting some votes in a box and not taking into consideration how those votes got into the boxes and declare that as democracy. You're fooling yourself and you're fooling the populace. And I bet tomorrow, if the PPP, and if and when the PPP gets into the opposition, it changes its definition of democracy. Democracy will then mean the right to protest. Democracy will then mean the right to resistance. But for now, they're in power, and democracy only means an election that was stolen. It doesn't mean resistance. It doesn't mean protest. It doesn't mean equal distribution of wealth. It doesn't mean leaving the quality of oversight of our oil money. All those things are not part of democracy by these, as far as these jackasses are concerned. Not just the PPPs, the jackasses who are praying every day in the newspaper. Eric Williams used to say, let the jackass pray. The thing is that they're braying and they're braying nonsense. I see some definitions of democracy. When I was a schoolboy doing general knowledge, in fourth standard, preparing for common entrance, I could not write those nonsense for my teacher at fourth standard. When these chaps talking about democracy. Democracy, what do they know of democracy that only democracy knows, to paraphrase CLR James? What do they know of democracy? Our own Arthur Lewis saw two types of democracy. There is formal democracy, which are elections, you have parliament, You have institutions, and they're there. You have elections every 5 years. He calls that formal democracy. And then the other part of democracy is substantive democracy. Having had your election, did your election lead to a society that is based on fairness and justice? Formal democracy is not the sum total of democracy. The sum total of democracy must not just be democratic inputs, but you must also have democratic outputs. If you have a fair election that is not free from fair, F-E-A-R, your elections are not democratic. If your elections lead to a government that governs by fear, bullyism, domination, then you cannot call yourselves a democracy. Democracy is not rule by rulers, a simple definition that the Americans have. They said democracy is ruled by the people. To make a distinction between a representative democracy and a monarchy. Monarchy is ruled by the crown. A representative democracy is ruled by the people. All of the people. Majoritarian democracy is just a model. It is not the only model. Because if majoritarian democracy, that means 51 equal 100, that's not substantive democracy. That is why the Americans in their Congress have what they call a supermajority. They institute that rule. It's a rule. The law says you rule by majority. But then they institute a rule that says you have to have 60 votes. So the law by itself does not define democracy. You have to put sometimes rules in place to give meaning and essence to the law. But these jackasses that are telling us you go to an election and you count the votes in the box after you open the box and see dead bodies in the box and see non-existent people and votes in the box. And in spite of that, you award the election to one side and you call it democracy. Go to hell. And it is that we have to counter. It is that kind of discourse that we need to have. And it is that kind of discourse that we attempt to have on these platforms that is sending Jack Dio crazy. Imagine Glenn Lal on TikTok sending them crazy. And if Glenn Lal continues to do that, people will believe him. Of course, people will believe him. You want people only to believe you? You are God, right? You see? And so sometimes we ought to recognize when we are causing disturbance in the camp.
And so, in recognition of Glenn Lal creating disturbance in the camp, before I go talk about Glenn Lal and Jack Hughes' rantings, I like to call him, this human approach to the PNC for membership, I like to ask, do you think it's self-serving or is it out of a recognition?
I don't know if it's true. I don't know if it's true, so I can't comment on it.
All right. Jack Dio and Glenn Lal and TikToking and his attack on people who were highlighting some of the ills of his government has recently sat down with the critic and as I say, came out swinging at the Aubrey Norton victory for leadership of the PNC. What's your take on Jaglio's and the PPP's response
As,
to
you, as
Aubrey being
usual,
elected?
the PPP is trying to tell Aubrey Norton how to rule, how to govern this party. It's a serious thing, you know, Kidaki, and I want the audience to be aware of it. The theory of the white man's burden arose out of a poem that was written by an American poet that basically says that the burden of civilizing the black man lies with the white man, and that Americans must go to all corners of the world to civilize the world, these half men, half man, half child. And that poem was then used as a justification. The contents of that poem was used as a justification for the American war in the Philippines. And we have an Indian Guyanese sense of the white man's burden. These black people are helpless. Their leaders abandon them. They don't have fathers in their homes. They don't have role models. They are sitting ducks to be hired for murder. You go and you throw some toys at them at Christmas time, and they are satisfied. The view of black people as not equal human beings, not equal human beings. The way in which that poem written by Rudyard Kipling characterized the black man. And there is now, it probably was locked up, but now it's coming out in the open. There is this Indian sense are you with us, or you're in? There is this Indian sense of black helplessness, of black vulnerability, and ultimately of black inferiority. And so here these black people, they've elected their leader, and every Indian with a pen in his hand is telling this leader what his people wants. Takumo Gunse has a letter in the Stabrook News and the Kaito News today, which is good reading. They're all telling Norton why he was elected and what he should do. And they're basically saying to Norton, look, don't confront us, don't confront the government. Go into Parliament, be a loyal opposition, and try to get some Indian votes. It will thing. I'll try to refurbish the image of the PNC. They're all telling Norton what to do, and in effect, telling black people what to do. It's a growing thing. They're all speaking for black people. Freddie Kissoon every day tells black people who their leaders should be, pulls down black leaders, and there are others in the newspapers who do the same thing. Black people are not capable of making their own decisions and decide who their leaders are. These people are telling black people who their leaders should be. It's a form of ethnic disrespect that stings. It stings because it goes to the very honor of our ethnic group. And when you do that, people like myself who wear black pride on my sleeves and on my face because I have to, will not let you get away with it. And when I respond to you, you then say I'm racist. Black people have to realize we can speak for ourselves. And we have to speak for ourselves. And we have to tell the Jack Dios and the Freddie Kissoons of this world where to get off. And we have to tell our leaders that they have to speak on our behalf. We have to insist on that. So what Jack Dio basically was doing is trying to tell Norton who Norton is. He knows Norton is not an academic. He knows Norton was on the fringes of the PNC. In effect, he's trying to tell black people, this man that the party just elected is inferior to me. That's the subtext of what that man is doing, or was doing there. And it is consistent. And I'm saying to African Guyanese, you don't have to hate Indians. You don't have to dislike Indians. You don't have to believe that Indians are inferior. You don't have to do those things. You have to believe that you are an equal human being. And you have to curb your behavior so that you do not feed that narrative of the listless, inferior African. Think twice about sending your child to stand up outside a fence while these people throw toys at them. Think twice. Yes, your children need toys. But why do they have to go and stand up on the fence and people throwing toys at them? Think twice about your sons who feel so empowered by a gun that they're prepared to hire themselves, to allow themselves to be hired as guns. We have to do work among our people. I would have loved to sit there and to say to black people, the government is the government of the day, and you must cooperate with the government. You must do what the government tells you. I wish I could say that, but I can't say that. I have to say to black people in no uncertain terms, you have a government that does not respect you as equal human beings. If they did, they will distribute the resources equally. If they did, they would not hire you as enforcers and gunmen for them. And so therefore, you have to recognize that you're not living in a society that is colorblind. If you were living in a society that was colorblind, then you could afford to say, I am engaging the government as the government of Guyana. But the government of Guyana is not governing in a colorblind manner. But they expect you, the African, to be colorblind. And some of us behave in a colorblind way. I'm saying that we do not live in a colorblind society. And as I said, I am not encouraging Black people to hate Indian people, to dislike Indian people, to believe Indian people are inferior. No. Our Indian brothers and sisters are as equal human beings as we are. But you have got to recognize that you live in a society with a government that philosophically feels that you are not equal to East Indians. And they're implementing policies. And I am not saying to African Guyanese, you should not be critical of your own leaders. You should tolerate any nonsense from your leaders. No. I'm saying be critical of your leaders, but do not believe that the alternative to your leaders are crooks on the other side. Are Indian Guyanese leaders who are crooks and racist. And that's the mistake some people make. Instead of looking within the African Guyanese community and seeing different types of leaders, if you don't like this type, you support this type and so on. We feel that if we don't like Norton, we have to go over and like Jack Dio. And I'm saying in a race-based society, in which power is determined by race, when you cross over and give your vote to the other side who believe you're inferior, you're walking against your own race. Would I like a society in which we vote based on issues? Yes. I would love such a society in which the Indian man goes to the poll and he marks that X based on the program and the policies of the party and not on the race of its leader. I would love that. Or the Black woman goes and votes based on the policy. I would love that. But that is not the reality of Guyana. And it is not about to become the reality tomorrow. Guyana is a race-based society where power is determined by race. And if power is determined by race, why are you fooling yourself, believing that you can vote anything but race? I am not encouraging Black people to vote race. I'm encouraging Black people to recognize that power is determined by race. And if you recognize that power is determined by race, ask yourself, how does my vote benefit my race? The Indian Guyanese brother and sister is asking himself and herself that question. And when he goes to the poll, he puts that X based on the answer to that question. How does my vote benefit my ethnic group in a society in which power is accumulated via race? Until we are able to break down the walls and the obstacles of race, in which our society can then engage its politics without reference to race, until that time comes, we have to roll with the punches. And if you feel that a certain type of leadership in the African Guyanese community does not fit the bill, look for other leaderships within the African Guyanese community. There may be that small number of Indians, and there is that small number of Indians who have already crossed and already engaged in the PNC or engaged in the coalition based on the promise that one day we can become this colorblind society. And we have to give kudos to them. For all you can say about the PNC, I do not see the PNC denigrating Indians as the PPP denigrates blacks. I do not see the PNC hiring Indians as phantoms. I did not see the PNC when they were in office distributing resources unequally. In fact, the PNC may be guilty of giving more resources to those aspects of the economy where Indians dominate, such as sugar. I didn't see the PNC discriminating economically against Indians as the PPP is discriminating economically against black people. And so therefore, our Indian brothers and sisters who come over to this side, for all you can say about the PNC, they messed up. Well, not the PNC so much, but Granger and his close cohorts, they messed up the coalition. But at least the PNC had the courage to join the coalition. I don't see the PPP doing it. And so, while in the past, people like myself would make this equivalency argument. Every time the PPP do something, we say, but the PNC they do it. That equivalency argument doesn't hold in many areas now. The PPP is behaving astronomically more racist than the PNC. Not because I say so, the facts speak for themselves. And you cannot be taking blows based on your race and then go out there and say, I am race neutral. No, you cannot be race neutral when you're being blows based on your race. A man is knocking you on your head every day because you're black like tar, and you're going out there and say, race is not important. It was Walter Rodney who said that if you want to use race to deny me my humanity, then I will use race to humanize myself. Walter Rodney, Groundings with My Brothers, said that in Jamaica in 1968-69. You can't have people using race to dehumanize you and you crying out, oh, you're colorblind and so on. I am not asking you to be racist. I'm not asking you to be bigots. I'm asking you to defend yourself against racism and bigotry. That's what I'm saying here. And you cannot defend yourself against racism and bigotry without reference to race. Black people who create race. Race was created to enslave black people in the 1700s. And we must not be afraid to confront the question of race. You're not offending your Indian friends when you stand up for your black dignity. In fact, your Indian friends, genuine Indian friends, will respect you more when you stand up for your black dignity. It is a question of dignity. It's a question of respect. I have to respect myself before I can get into any meaningful, respectful relationship. To respect myself. And so Jack Dio and them are trying to demean Black people. And they're trying to say to Black people, Aubrey North is not good for you. Look, I and others fought against Mr. Burnham's excesses. We did. And many creditors will help him to bring down the PNC in 1992. But if our Indian Guyanese leaders are constantly constructing Burnham as the devil and using that to invalidate Black dignity, using that to say that Black people chase back bore, then I will have to defend Burnham. My defense of Burnham is not a defense of the comrade leader. Burnham was not my comrade leader. He was my president, but not my comrade leader. So my defense of Burnham is not a defense of the wisdom of the comrade leader. That is for his supporters and the PNC people. They can do that well. But I will defend Burnham as a form of defense of Black dignity. Because if you're using Burnham to take away and nullify the dignity of Black people, then you're leaving me with no choice. In my defense of Black people, to embrace Burnham. As I said, I'm not embracing Burnham as the great comrade leader, all the wisdom and all that kind of thing. I never believed that. But I don't disagree with people who believe it, people who know him and work with him, think that he's a great leader and they do a good job of doing that. That's not my job. My job is in defense of Black dignity. And if you're using Burnham to beat Black people over the head, then I will have to embrace Burnham. If you're using Aubrey Norton's election to say that Aubrey Norton is some epitome of the violent Black leader, and Aubrey Norton is not good enough for Black people, and that Aubrey Norton is this or that, I will have no choice but to embrace Aubrey Norton in defense of Black people. Because he's a Black brother. Burnham is a Black brother. I didn't agree with Burnham all the time. In fact, I disagreed with Burnham most of the time when I was a young man. I don't agree with Aubrey Norton all the time. But if you're going to paint Aubrey Norton, he's not an academic, he's a not natal, he's this. No. David Hinds will have to embrace Aubrey Norton and say, you shall not do that. And so that is where I stand on this recent attack on Aubrey Norton by Mr. Jack Dio and all the other scribes that are appointing themselves as knowing what Black people want and what Black people should want.
It's 8:30 and you're tuned to the BUXTONIAN Morning Time. We're chatting with Dr. David Hinds about all manner of things in the society, societal ills and politics and so on and so forth. Usually at this time we'll open up the lines. Well, we would have opened up the lines a long time before now. But one last observation before you go, Dr. Hinds. The rains are here. Floods are reported all over the place. People's dwellings are underwater, gardens underwater, streets underwater. Many are arguing that during the time of the coalition, thanks to David Patterson, they say, despite perhaps similar quantum of rain, they have not seen this kind of flooding in the neighborhoods. What has changed from then to now?
I don't know, Kinakin, I don't play politics with nature. I don't play politics with things like floods. I don't play politics with, things that we don't seem to have control over, global warming and all of those things. I don't play politics with it, under which government I'd move for. I leave that to the active politicians and so on. I'm not getting into that. But what I wish to see is that things like our vulnerability to floods should not be political footballs. And the PPP, which politicizes everything, will then have to own the floods. They've owned everything that they say they have improved since last year, August. And so you have to own the floods too. And understand the fallacy of turning everything into party politics. It's a fallacy. Roads, infrastructure, these are things that all governments must do. I went to South Africa shortly after the apartheid regime came to an end. And I've not seen more advanced roads and road network anywhere in the world that I've visited like I see in that country. And it was done under apartheid. Did that make the apartheid government good? No. All governments are responsible for infrastructure. When you went into Johannesburg, where Black people live, you saw the difference in the infrastructure. But when you went into the white areas, infrastructure to make your skin crawl. And all governments are responsible for infrastructure. That's what people pay taxes for and all of that stuff. And this government is more interested in carrying out its political manifesto rather than defending the country against flooding. All governments must do that. We are vulnerable. Our geographical location, our topography, means that whatever government is in power, we will be vulnerable to floods. And that is why I am reluctant to blame flooding on a government. And the PPP has to understand that. Do not politicize these things. Because when you do, and the things go bad, you cannot vex when people say you are responsible for the flooding. I do not want to get into that kind of talk. Because I don't believe the PPP is responsible for flooding. We all are sensible enough to know that floods arise out of natural circumstances and the change in climate and all of that. But what I must indict the PPP for is priorities. What are your priorities? Is your priority giving away our monies to your supporters in exchange for their votes? Is your priority tearing down the checks and balances on the National Resource Fund? Is your priority putting money in the hands of your big businessmen friends? Is your priority preparing for heavy rainfall? It seems to me your priority is the first three and not the last one. And in that regard, you will have to own the floods.
Thank you. And with that, we go to the phone lines. The lines are open. It's now 25 minutes to the 9 o'clock hour. I'll start, before I even open up the lines and start playing these voice notes, let me inform you, viewers, that former Minister of Finance Winston Jordan was summoned to attend the court today, and so he appears in court 9 o'clock this morning, the Georgetown Magistrates Court. Those of you who are close and can go there and lend some support, I encourage you to do that. I'm thinking whether or not if I leave here at 9 o'clock, I'll get there in time. But I certainly encourage you, if you're nearby, go there and show our brother some support. As he was summoned to attend court this morning. Georgetown Magistrates Court it is at 9. Dr. Hinds, you want to say anything on that before I start to play these voice notes?
And the hungering of our leaders continue. And as you say, you know, every long rope get an end. And you know, when the PPP has to face the retaliation of the masses of this country, it can't blame me for it, or you, or Mark Ben's coppers that they're doing. They have only themselves to blame.
Well, you have to follow the rules. I said I was going to play some voice notes, then open the lines. Anyhow, you're in breach, but I will forgive you this morning. You're a good citizen.
No, God.
You're live.
Play your voice note and I gonna hold the line.
You're live. You're live, Rhonda. You're live. Rhonda, you're live.
Okay, yeah. Good morning, Dr. Hinds.
Good morning.
I noticed a nice picture with you online. No, that's what's great. Anyhow, in the topics that were being raised, the first thing I thought it was because I hardly heard the entire thing because I had to have my phone to my ear because of the rain. Anyway, about people and the dances and gun plays and so. This is a norm. I used to go on party, and when guns start to appear as partners in dancehall, I stopped going because I frighten guns. About the other things that you spoke about with the Mr. Norton and how the PPP is trying to put down Mr. Norton as a racialist, that he's all for black. I believe the PPP should not say that because everybody know under Barrett Jack deal, the PPP as a whole, they believe in their race and they're not even looking at all of the race because those people like the Glenn Lalls and all those people who behaved as the Ponzi scheme, the pyramid game, that they try to elevate, borrow them to the top of the ladder, the top of the pyramid. They are now seeing where the Ponzi doesn't work. Box, everybody does get a chance, but Ponzi, only them at the top of the pyramid does get it. So people like Glenn Lal now is now turning to the public to get sympathy, and for me, I wouldn't give him sympathy. Now there are other persons like Henry Jeffrey, the Faith Schumann and all of them. I hope Aubrey Norton don't ever make the mistake to allow them to be given any top role in APNU because they will be charandas, along with that famous teacher who called strike against APNU. Let me give you a little insight. I was a nurse, and because of problems, I had to leave the job. When I applied to places for jobs, Ministry of Health used to block me, said that they have not released me from their employ. But Ministry of Health was not paying me a salary, with all they were blocking me. And the order of the public servant is that if somebody is in your employ and they don't report for duty, you send them 3 letters, warning letters about the job, and you follow those 3 letters by a dismissal letter. They are no longer attached to the ministry. Ministry of Health never did that. Blam, I took them to court. That time I think it was, I can't remember what was the lawyer. I think it was Dude Nadsing, a famous lawyer for the PPP. And when we went to court, The matter was like dismissed. Anyway, my lawyer told me we will appeal this case. The case was appealed in afternoon's time. And when the case appealed in afternoon time, I told my lawyer, I said, look, if we gonna win this case, afternoon gonna gotta find money to pay me. The money would have finished me out, give me a trip by a vehicle. And when I look at it, I said, this is happening afternoon time. And I forego that case, taking it into afternoon time to pay me a money that should have been paid through PPP. And that is what I did as a poor person. And I have seen where people went to afternoon with blood in the eyes for things that PPP should have been given to them. Now, at the other part, yesterday you talk about this thing where they are trying to put into law harvesting of body parts. Now in China and in India, where body parts are harvested, people come from the top countries like Canada, America, England, and those high places, and goes to those slum areas and pay people for body parts. Now you might be a person in India and you got a wife and a set of children and they do a blood test, blum, this person is compatible. They pay them couple rupees or whatever, little bit of money that will fill the person, the family owners eye, because these people are living way below the poverty line. And if somebody come and give you a $2, might look like $2 million plum, you sell off your people and they gone for body parts. So I hope that the Guyanese public should see through and make certain that bill never see the light of day. The PPP are plunging, is plunging the Africans in Guyana to a below poverty line. And when you plunge them below poverty line and the backs are against the wall, you see what's going to happen by the parts. Now the young people who like to go out and party, we have got to become watchful, because a busload of black Africans may go out there to a party and you snatch a few, because when you snatch the few, you make certain you're making game. Because let me tell you something, the only organs in the body where they don't really like use is mostly your appendix and you got cancer and you touch them thing that does pop, because they like foul guard. They don't use them. But all the other organs, you never start using your gut as yet. And sometimes they might find things to use people's guts for. So the entire body of a person could be sold. Your skin and all could use for skin graft. So imagine a man they can't get children of one race, scramble another race, mainly the black they gonna take. And when they do look now, you could get children. And instead of each children coming as he race, they coming as the black race. Guyanese, be watchful on this bill.
Thank you,
I
Rana.
shudder to think what will be the outcome of a bill like that. And we have got to be watchful. We got to know how we moving. We got to move in crowds, not too much crowds because of COVID, and watch one another back. That is my contribution to the. And the last one, Dr. Hinds, I do get vets. Now, if you're talking about race, you would say the blacks, and you would say the Indians. In the textbooks, white man, some like the textbook, they called us Africans and Negroes. We must refer to ourselves as that, because if we are referring to the Indians who massacred Bongo Koli from India, we cannot say Koli. Why must we diminish ourselves and say the blacks and say the Indians, that means that we are showing that we are an inferior people to the Indians. If we say black, holy. If we say Africans or Negroes, Indians. Just the point. Don't let me keep upgrading ourselves. Because as long as we downgrade ourselves, we will put ourselves as inferior to these people. Holy to black, Indian to African. Thanks. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Voice note.
Good morning, Mr. Kadaki and Mr. Hinds. You guys are speaking about the Natural Resources Fund, the bill that passed under the coalition. My understanding on that bill was passed after the government was fall. After the no confidence motion, there was no parliament. This bill now, according to my understanding, you guys could try and explain it to the audience and myself. This bill now is going to Parliament. So that bill, the first bill, was not void. It didn't pass in Parliament. There was no Parliament. The government was the caretaker government at that time. So, if you guys could touch on that. And all the stuff was, look, the other day, talking about driving and all these things. Two young guys, and dozens of them every day by the bus park, under the clock. Dozens of them. One in jail right now, the other one dead. And look at the video. Everybody was cheering on. Not Indian people, not Amerindian, not Portuguese. Black people. Our people. We was cheering on. The guy that is in jail now, mother cried on national TV and said that guy, she said her son was wrong, but he was pushed. And everybody cheered. They could have stopped it. And what you guys got to do as leaders is go by the bus park and get all of them off the park there. Be too much of them. And all they're doing is trying to make a hustle. And they don't care who the hustle, who pours to go in, who pocket to go in. Let me look at that. A bus got a conductor and a bus got a driver. But they got certain bus, and we all know the buses in Guyana. Me don't ride bus. Thank you.
Call A Live, good morning.
Yeah, good morning. Happy holidays to everyone. I want to ask Mr. Hinds, Dr. Hinds, my favorite person. You are my favorite too, but Dr. Hinds. I want to ask Dr. Hinds a question. Now, I was listening to the opposition leader, with the Chinese critic talking, and he mentioned something that caught my attention. He's saying that he doesn't have to engage Mr. Aubrey Norton because he's not the opposition leader. Now, if Mr. Norton indeed is not the opposition leader and Mr. Harmon is, how will we sort out that situation? Because the Guyanese people has lost confidence in Mr. Harmon, and everyone has decided to throw their support behind Mr. Norton. So how Mr. Norton is going to lead from behind, in a sense that if he's not the opposition leader, and the president and this man, well, the two presidents decide that they're not going to engage Mr. Norton because of the fact that he's not the opposition leader, how are we going to go forward? Mr. Norton would need the leadership of the party in order to engage these people. So I'm thinking, without being the opposition leader, because the Constitution gives rights for the opposition leader to engage the president, and he's just the leader of the PMC. So how are we going to move forward with that? And this man, this Barajak Yul man, he knows that. He already tapped into that, and he knows that Norton is a leader without powers. And he's signaling that to us. He doesn't have respect for him because he knows that Norton can go up to him, you know, tooth and nail, and he's not afraid of him. So he would like to keep Harmon in that position for the longest while. And in my humble opinion, if Mr. Harmon stays there, he's just like staggering the party. He's just keeping us back because he's there, but it's like a fifth wheel. He cannot represent us. Neither can he do anything. So what is his stand as the leader of the opposition at this moment? What is the current opposition leader? What is he doing? He's not doing anything much. And also with regards to, I'm switching now, I'm going to the court, the case that we have. Based on my knowledge, Mr. Hinds, correct me if I'm wrong, our constitution says the last court for any elections matter, it should be the appellate court. So I'm thinking that Mr. Nandilal is very aware of that. So why is he kicking the can down the road to say take it to the CCJ? I'm thinking that the CCJ only option would be to send this case right back to the appellate court. Because imagine if the CCJ was to rule and say that our court, our appellate court, does not have the right to hear that case, and we are in trouble. We are in serious, serious trouble. I cannot wait to see how the CCJ is going to rule. And I'm thinking that Barajak Dio sit down on television there Christmas Eve with a critic. He's telling us, the Guyanese people, that the APN, you have rigged the election. He's telling us that, hey, all of these guys we have here, which is Mingo and, you know, Lowenfield and all of them, they're the riggers. We caught them, yes. But yet still you don't want to show us how you caught them. You don't think as Guyanese we should be allowed to see how Mingo rigged this election? And the only way we can see that is through the elections petition. Why are you hindering us, the Guyanese people, Mr. Barajak Dio and Mr. Anil Nandilal, from us seeing the real riggers who you claim is Mingo? Everybody jump up, it's Mingo, 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 bingo. Okay, let's see the bingo now. Let's see how he rigged it. Why are you afraid to show us how you say that, this case? Why are you demonizing the judges? When the judge in the High Court ruled that, okay, we lost the case, the APN, you lost the case, all of us wanted, all we want to see, listen, if Mr. Barajak, if you win that election, fair and square, we the Guyanese people have absolutely no problem. In fact, we would even apologize to you for demonizing you. We would be the first one to stand up and say, yes, you are the legitimate government. But you cannot. After that recount we saw it with our own eyes, Mr. Barajak, and the only way you can clear our thoughts, the only way we can forgive you is by taking this case to the appellate court, let the judges hear it, let we the Guyanese people who are right thinking people, not all of us are stupid, some of us have sense. We want to see the case. When that case is brought forward and we see for ourselves that Mingo, Lowenfield, and all the rest of them are guilty of election fraud, then yes, throw the book at them. But how can you now fight tooth and nail? You're going to the CCJ to prevent all the Guyanese. Any right-thinking one of us, come on, does that make sense to us? Why are these people fighting that we should not see what's happening in our election? What is wrong with us? Something is wrong. You gotta be, this is a textbook definition for stupidity. Anyone who does not want to see what happened in our election. We are not stupid people. The world is looking at us as though we're stupid. And we are not. Why is it Barajak, fight? Oh, we have to go to the CCJ, so don't make them here. So why is it he didn't go to the CCJ when Mr. Afghan ruled in favor of them that because of a simple error, the case can be heard? So we should just fold our hands, let Barajak spend our money, spend the oil money. Guyana is one of the richest countries. That's all they say, we rich, the rich. Look how the citizens are living. They are poor like a church mouse. The average citizen is only one set of people is benefiting. You don't have to, listen, even a blind man can see. The blind man, yes, the country is rich. It's like your father is rich, but you are poor. You don't have nothing. So you can prove about all your father's wealth, but you are poor. So mommy got, daddy got, blessed be the child that have his own. Which Guyanese people, average Guyanese, have their own? Yes, we have a lot of stuff going on for us. Everywhere you turn, Guyanese, look at those other oil-rich countries. You can see the people is prospering. You go home, down to your belt, the Guyanese people them want. Hey, left that with me, left that with me. Why? Because of the poverty in the country, and they are so rich. I am not like, how you say, bringing down my people, but that's reality. You understand? Sometimes you want to go home, but you're afraid. You're afraid. Look at the crime in the country. Then the minister's going to say, oh, we have a hold on crime. Who are these people talking to? Sometimes we wonder who are they speaking to. Are they speaking to dumb people? Because we understand what's going on. So, Mr. Barajagdio, I'm speaking directly to you. We, the Guyanese people, we want to see that election petition go forward. We want to hear what really happened in our election. And if Mr. Irfan Ali win that election fair and square through the courts and it's validated, we personally will respect you. But unless that happens, we have zero respect for you. Because based on our knowledge, you were not elected. You were selected and you were installed. Prove us wrong by letting that elections petition go through. Then you can stand up fair and square and lock up Mingo and lock up everybody else. Until then, look, you have missed this man going to court here today. For what? All of you should be in court because only the black folks, I'm not racist, but only the black people have been locked up so far. Nobody else can do nothing wrong. We watched that case from day one. Why we can't see it to the end now? Come on, Mr. Barajagdio. Everybody's not as stupid as you think we are. We are not stupid. And I want 2022 to come around very fast. And in my gut feeling, I believe that the CCJ is going to send this case right back to the appellate court. Because the CCJ, in my humble opinion, doesn't have the right to rule on our elections matter. They insert themselves the last time, and I believe they saw and they realized they did wrong. And I'm really hoping that they will do the right thing and send this case back to the lower courts. And then we can move forward and all Guyanese can see what happened in our election. Until then, Mr. Barajagdio, please don't accuse nobody of rigging because we see you is the biggest rigger right now. So please leave us alone, let that case go forward and let every right-thinking Guyanese think for themselves and want to know why you and Nandila don't want this case to go forward. Until then, very happy new year, and we know it's going to be a very happy new year for us because trust me, that case coming right back to the CCJ. Justice delayed is not justice denied, Guyanese people. We're going to find out exactly what happened in our election, and then and only then we can move forward. Thank you very much. Happy new year in advance. Have a blessed day and wonderful day, everyone. Thank you. Bye.
Thank you, caller. Dr. Hinds, a whole lot has been said.
Yes. I mean, the caller really was quite eloquent there in terms of explaining why they don't want us to see what happens in the election. But she asked two substantive questions. The first one was about the opposition leader. Look, we have two opposition leaders. We have an opposition leader in parliament. We have an opposition leader in parliament, and we have an opposition leader outside of parliament. In matters that have to do with the constitution, the PPP leaders ought to be engaging Mr. Harman because he's elected to parliament. In matters that have to do with national consensus, with national security, with the ethnic and political wholeness of our country, in matters that have to do with equitable distribution of wealth, the PPP ought to be dealing with Aubrey Norton. Aubrey Norton is the elected political leader. Mr. Harman is the elected parliamentary leader. And both of them are opposition leaders. Guyana is not the only place. If you go to Antigua, for example, and the Antiguan opposition party has one seat in parliament, and the person who occupied that seat is the opposition leader in parliament, but the leader of the opposition party is the opposition leader outside of parliament. So Guyana is not the only place where you have two opposition leaders. That happens when the leader of the party is not in parliament. It happened in Trinidad when Patrick Manning in 1986 was one of 3 PNM members who was elected. He was opposition leader in parliament, but the leader of the PNM was outside of parliament. And Manning only became the leader of the PNM later on. So there is precedence of that across the region where you have 2 opposition leaders. So I want to answer that. And they are bound, like I said, by the Constitution to engage Mr. Armand on constitutional matters where the president has to meet constitutional requirements. He has to engage Armand. But where larger political issues are concerned, if there is a national crisis, if there is a crisis on the border with Venezuela, he has to engage Norton because the people elected Norton as their leader. So they're 2 opposition leaders. Secondly, on the matter of election matters, I think that Don Gregory and Janet Cummings got it right. If the High Court decides on an election petition and rule that this party won and that party didn't won, or throw out the petition or uphold the petition, once the court makes a ruling on the petition, that's the High Court, it cannot be appealed. In the case that is before the appeal court, it's not a ruling on a petition. It's the throwing out of a petition based on technical grounds. So the court did not make a ruling on the petition. And once the court did not make a ruling on the petition, the appeal court can hear the case. And so I think that those 2 justices got it right. If the High Court, I repeat, if the High Court made a ruling and said this petition is thrown out after hearing it, or this petition is upheld after hearing it, then the appeal court doesn't have the jurisdiction to hear it. But in this case, the court didn't make a ruling on the petition. The court threw the petition on a technicality. In that case, the appeal court can hear it.
Thank you, Dr. Hinds. More voice note.
Hi, morning. I be prepared to go there to the court, but this place flood out, man. We flood out there. I know what do you think? Cause like you study in the flood, you study in town there and flood all.
Good morning.
Hi, good morning. Good morning, good morning, Mr. Hinds. My part is with this petition. I want to know why the coalition is allowing this petition to be kicked down the road like that. The last hearing there at the appellate court, nonetheless, when the coalition asked for a stay, or to decide what to do with the case, nonetheless, they stand up boldly and object to the stay. And the coalition had to beg and they give them just a few hours. They nonetheless make the case clearly that it's been prolonging for too long. Why these opportunities are rising and the coalition is not making good off of these situations? Why they sit there quietly and allow this not allow them to have a stay so that they could make up their mind or do what they want with the leisure of time to go to the CCJ. Man, this is since 2020. Guys just sitting there want to know what is going on with their vote. And they should have objected to this to the state and put some pressure on the judges them the same way and let it come with a few hours or something. Make a decision whether to give them a stay, the stay that they want or not. But all the coalition is doing is sign up and allow these people to get away. That's the reason why this thing can't come to an end. Nothing could come to an end there in Guyana. They are part of this chaos. People want to know what is going on. Why you sit there and then object to this nonsense that Nandalale is going on with? Nandalale did it the last time. That's the reason why the gate of hell was opened up on the Guyanese people to this day. Because they didn't allow us stay. They didn't agree to us stay.
Thank you, caller.
I think that, I think Florida could do something better than what they're doing, man. That's my take. Thank you.
Voice note.
Good morning, Ms. Kadaki and Dr. Hinds. This morning, I would like to talk about the harvesting of body parts. Now, in India and China are highly populated countries where they do organ harvesting. However, Guyana is a very small, maybe 1/10 of the population of India or China. In Guyana, too, we don't have any system set up. Now, a doctor could go into you and tell you, oh, you have to do a surgery. When your surgery is finished, you could lose a kidney. You don't know. We have to put certain mechanism in order before this thing could happen. When you go to the doctor, you don't get a documentation to show you what the doctor did, what the doctor ordered, so that you could go and recheck it with another doctor, but certainly so you will come up with missing body parts. I remember of one woman who went to the doctor. She said she had, he said that she had a problem with her tubes. Now, he was to take out one of these tubes. After marriage, she realized that she didn't get pregnant when she
I think I messed that one up. Dr. Hinds.
I didn't quite hear the voice
Yes,
note.
it was quite low. All right, let me play another voice note as we move along. It's past program time, but I'm trying to get the voice notes out.
Good morning, Kadaki. Concerning this bill that will be taken to the Parliament by the PPP, you're hearing the opposition side saying there's nothing much you can do. Because of the 1-seat majority that the PPP have in Parliament. But the thing is, are you saying the whole country, that the whole of Guyana is dependent on couple people in a building? Are you giving the power, the whole power of Guyana, of the Guyanese people, to the couple people in the building? Are you saying that there is nothing the people can do? Are you saying that if there's 5,000 people in front of Parliament opposing this bill tomorrow, are you saying that the people in Parliament would still pass this bill? Is it that the people don't have any say in Guyana? What is really going on? And the politicians on the opposition side are not giving the full power to the people. It's like they're still holding back the people from doing what they have to do and what they need to do. The people have ultimate power at the end of the day, and they're the one need to stop the stupidness that is going on.
Yes, Dr. Hinds, that voice note that you're shaking your head. I ask this, the question all the time. Why do we keep saying that, they have the majority and this thing will go through? What about flooding the streets in front of the parliament? I asked that same question this morning.
That the answer to that question is determined by the leaders and what tactics and strategy they employ. And we can question their tactics and strategy. But I was shaking my head because I think what the caller was saying, there was precisely what I was trying to explain earlier, that democracy, there are two types of democracy. There are substantive democracy, formal democracy and substantive democracy. The formal democracy says that there's nothing you can do in parliament. They have the majority, and you can stall and stall and stall. You can use all kind of parliamentary tactics. If you're allowed to, the speaker, of course, will allow you to. But at the end, they will pass it. That's the formal side. But you can stop them from passing it with substantive democracy. And that is your democratic right to make it difficult for the society to carry on business as usual, to make it difficult for the government to carry on business as usual. That is the way you stop what is the advantage that's taken in parliament. That the government has to lose something outside of parliament for it to give in to what's in it. And so the substantive part of democracy is the people have the power of protest and resistance. And if that power, if that protest and resistance are effective enough, they can stop the government from using its majority inside of parliament. Let me repeat. The democratic right of the people to protest and resistance, if it is effective enough that the government loses something, it is only at that point that the government will compromise inside of parliament. And so that's why I was shaking my head, because the whole concept, you see, it's one thing to say that people should flood the street, but it don't happen like that, right? The opposition, who are the leaders, that's why you have leaders. They have to determine what is it they want. They have to determine whether they have enough street power in order to inflict enough blows on the government to force it to act differently inside of parliament. And maybe the opposition has concluded that it does not have that capacity right now. It's one thing to go out and put 5,000 people on the street, and at the end of the day, they're still, you don't make no inroads, you don't cause them to budge, and people will not come out the next time. But if you take 5,000 people on the streets and you're able to make them budge, then you will get 10,000 the next time and 20,000 the next time. But if you carry 5,000 and they budge, the next time you're going to get 2,000 and 1,500. So leaders have to make that hit, So we have to be somewhat, considerate of the situation and the tactics and strategy.
Voice note.
Good morning, Kadaki. Happy holidays to you, Dr. Hinds. For the caller that just called and saying that the place flood. Listen, when you're fighting for your rights, it ain't got nothing to do with flood. Put on your boots and go there. Put on your long boots and go there. Understand me? Put your boots on and go and fight for your rights. It ain't got nothing to do with the flood. Wear a slipper. Go on out there and fight for your country. What do you? You understand me? It ain't got nothing to do with flood. There's no excuse for that. Go along out there. You ain't got time for waste.
All right, that's the final voice note for the morning. It is now 9 hours 15. We have gone past program time. I encourage you to go. You need to go. If you can, go out and support Winston Jordan this morning at the Joshua Magistrates Court. And certainly listen for the call of the leader of the PNC and the leader of the opposition and everybody, and see what will happen in relation to if there's any mass organizing against this bill that the PPP is going to Parliament with. Dr. Hinds, you want to make some closing remarks, or you have said enough?
I've said so much that I don't think I've closed. Just to say that you know, as we go about the final days of the year, just keep in mind that here in Guyana we've lost a distinguished daughter, Professor Justin Long, who was part of the cultural architecture of our country, come from a family of artists, musicians. But above all, she was the founder and leader of the Pan-African movement in Guyana. I have interacted with Professor Long a few times. She's such a humble soul, remarkably human being, quiet demeanor, doesn't throw or tremendous intellect around, didn't do that. We have lost an icon. The rest of the country may not know or name as much because she never sought the limelight. She always sought to promote younger people in the spirit of community and Pan-Africanism. But we don't have to know her personally or to know her name to say thanks and to offer up a prayer for our bereaved family. And further afield, Bishop Desmond Tutu, who transitioned at age 90 over the last couple of days, truly a giant, and it's a name that more people would know because of his tremendous role in human rights, promoting human rights, and fighting for the dignity of Black people and brown people in South Africa. And I know Rhonda doesn't like the term Black, but one of these days I'll explain where the term Black comes from and why it's a relative term. Bishop Tutu certainly was a giant. For me, what marks him as an important personage was the fact that he was literally the face of the anti-apartheid movement while Mandela, in the last years, the 80s and the 90s, while Mandela was in prison. As soon as Mandela came out, he passed the baton onto Mandela as the real a leader of the Black struggle in South Africa. We need more Desmond Tutus who use the pulpit to do what Christians and religious people are called to do, and that is to praise their God. But as he once intimated, praising God alone does not bring justice. He took his pulpit out on the streets into the struggle and turned the church and his religion into sharp, very sharp tools of struggle and liberation. If there is ever a personification of liberation theology, it is Desmond Tutu. Let us give thanks that a Black man, a man from poor circumstances, walked this world and turned his ministry and turned his pulpit into liberation and freedom for all underprivileged people in South Africa and by extension, the world. Give thanks.
Thank you, Dr. Hinds. And that's, in essence, a wrap on BUXTONIAN Morning Time this morning. It's 20 minutes past 9 o'clock. Let me remind you to come on down to Kidam's Place, sideline down Buxton, to be entertained as we approach the end of the year. The bar and lounge will be open from at 4 o'clock this afternoon and every afternoon. Come down, enjoy some good music, relaxation time, have some cool drinks and so on and so forth. And definitely, we have a Thursday night swing, and we also have an All Year's night swing. So make it a date and don't be late. Thank you for being here. Stay good. Go out and lend your support to Winston Jordan. And let's hear what's happening in relation to that bill that is going to be taken to Parliament. Have a great day, y'all. See you tomorrow morning for another program.